Manchester from Bristol. 4 hours it took me.
What? That's madness.
It's the traffic. There's always bloody roadworks between Stoke and Manchester.
Yeah.
Widening of the motorway or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they seem to have been doing it for like 5 years, but you always get caught at that for 45 minutes. It's a pain in the arse.
I think sometimes they just kind of do their own thing. I think it's kind of like, we've got nothing else to do.
That's it. They've probably been awarded £100 million or something to extend the motorway, and they'll do what they're doing and probably hang it out for another 5 years.
Well, that's the thing. It's often a lot of those things aren't tied to particular sort of delivery times and stuff. We're live.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the Semrush live audit. Today we have David Iwanow. I hope I pronounced that properly, David. There's many other ways you can pronounce your name, depending on where you come from. So David will be presenting a live site audit today. David is an experienced guy. He has been in SEO for years, doing a bit of in-house work, and he has worked with several different agencies. And I'll let David introduce himself and tell you a bit more about him and what he's doing. So what's been happening, David? I know you've... And if you want to just tell the viewers where you work now and a bit about that.
Yep. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So I've been doing SEO for a bit over 10 years, which makes me feel kind of old in some ways. I guess I've spent a lot of that time working within digital marketing agencies, as well as in-house. So I recently joined the team here in London at Shipstead Media Group as SEO manager for global deployments. So in charge of our global platform, which is a pretty cool opportunity. And obviously, spoken in the past with people like Craig, kind of enjoy this opportunity to, I guess, be put on the spot and quizzed on my SEO knowledge, and had the opportunity to go through the list of some of the sites submitted to the Semrush team. We picked 3 sites which we thought would be interesting to talk through, and also we've got a top 10 list of, based on people who submitted their sites, which 10 items I think sites should focus on fixing.
Perfect. So just while we're waiting for the viewers to come in, we'll probably just talk. I'll just ask you a couple of questions just now, just to give the audience some information. So how important do you feel auditing a website is, and maybe how often would you recommend auditing a website for someone?
I guess the main thing around this aspect of auditing websites is making sure that the building blocks of your website are in a good position. Because I know I've worked in clients in the past where we try to do a lot of offsite activity, but the technical aspects were causing them a lot of problems in terms of they had redirect issues, they had internal linking issues. A number of their inbound links were pointing to redirects. So it doesn't matter how much sort of offsite activity we did, the core basics of their site was, I guess, broken, so we couldn't give the results they kind of expected, and they needed in that particular space. I definitely think audit's a very important part. In terms of how often you should do it, it depends on, I guess, the number of errors you experience and how your traffic's growing. So if you've recently launched a website in the last 6 to 12 months and your traffic's continuing to grow, you're not really seeing too many errors within Google Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, or even Semrush audits. So if you're seeing the general basics are fairly good in terms of a hygienic factor, and your traffic is continuing to grow, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's when your traffic patterns start to slow down or start to decline, that's when you probably want to start looking into an audit.
Cool. And how important is UX for mobile SEO? Just a question I've always wanted to ask other SEOs, and if you could give us your feedback on that.
Yes, I definitely think mobile user experience is very important in regards to both from the user perspective, but also from Google. Because when you think about when you open a website on a mobile device, your attention span and your, I guess, pain factors, they're much lower than they are on desktop. So if you're on a desktop device and the site doesn't load, fine, that's no problem. You hit refresh, you're good to go. On a mobile device, you're often a bit more time sensitive, you're a bit more frustrated, things load a lot slower. And also, when you look at it from Google's perspective, they've actually built a, I guess, a user experience report into Google Search Console. So it's important enough that Google's allocated engineers to flag things you need to fix. So I don't think Google would be doing these types of things if they didn't think that it would be beneficial for your visitors.
So obviously, when you're checking all of these things out, you have to have software or analysis tools. How important are these things for SEO in general?
I think they're very important. Obviously, when you've got them set up and running in the background, they're kind of your, I guess, your backup in terms of you're busy doing some other project, or you're busy, preparing reports or doing something, and you get a notification from Semrush or one of the other crawlers that it's experienced a couple of faults or bugs. So the advantage of these types of things is kind of your backup. It checks that everything you're doing has been implemented correctly or as expected, and they often find things that I guess will cause you problems before you even notice them. Maybe there's a new release and they broke the schema tags, or maybe the open graph tags have been corrupted or not showing properly. So yeah, so I think these types of tools are good because they're kind of the second set of eyes. And the also advantage is, and I've found in the past, that we were actually able to use these types of tools to identify bugs before developers even realized. So they'd roll out a staging site accidentally, or they rolled out a new version and they managed to break a whole lot of things. Using a lot of these sort of automated tools, we were able to pick up when things were fixed, but also when things were broken before the developers were able to notify the team.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that, David. Thanks for answering those questions. What we will do now is carry on and allow you to show everyone your live site audit. If anyone's got any questions that they want me to ask David, whether it's after he finishes saying something, get us on the live chat, and I'll certainly try and put any relevant questions to David as and when I can. And yeah, David, the stage is yours.
Why, thank you very much. Let's do this right. Let's share application window. And I think we're live. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll go back to the first screen. Apologize. If you've got any questions, don't forget to use the hashtag #LiveSiteAudit. And I'd like to thank Semrush for inviting me along for this session, and Craig moderating. So a bit about myself. So basically, I've been doing SEO for about 10 years. I spent a mixture of that time obviously in-house, but also working with several digital agencies, both in Australia and the UK. In July 2017, I joined the Shipstead Media Group as SEO manager in charge of global deployments. So some of the things I've worked on in the past. So I've worked on lots of amazing brands over the last 10 years, from SEO perspective, social media, content marketing, analytics, across retail, finance, a lot of work in the classifieds over the last couple of years, as well as B2C. And yeah, so worked with a lot of very cool brands. And I guess the great thing is you've picked up lots of tips and tricks over the years. And also you've picked up a lot of things which clients may have not have done right, or their competitors may not have done right. So I think that's a great learning experience. A quick plug. So I don't work for an agency, so I don't get anything out of this. But I would like to invite any marketers or particularly developers. We're actually hiring. So, I'd love you to join my team. We're in 22 countries around the world. So definitely check out Shipstead Jobs. We are looking for amazing people to join my team and build amazing products. So the live audit. Who are we featuring this webinar? So I think we had a submission of around 400 people for this particular audit, which was great. A couple of people submitted 3 or 4 times. So yeah, so we obviously went through the list. We looked on some of the sites which we thought were fairly diverse. And the 3 sites we picked to go through in a bit more detail was Last Night of Freedom, Mail Basics, and Webipedia. I also outlined a top 10 list of fixes based on sites that were submitted. So if you submitted your site, you may show up in the top 10 list of things you should improve or fix. So the first one off the blocks is Last Night of Freedom. So it's a UK-based site for stag and hens nights. So I guess the first place which I start in regards to any SEO audit is trying to look at a top-level overview of how everything's performing. So I set up, obviously, the site audit within Semrush and basically ran a crawl across the site. So the great thing about this particular audit report, it shows that there's a lot of opportunity for improvements across the platform. So obviously scoring 69% is the highest scale, but you can see there's a lot of small elements. So you can see there's a number of errors, there's some warnings, there's some crawlability issues, but the good thing is there's not too many broken links or redirects. So I think Last Night of Freedom have done that pretty well, fixed a lot of those problems. But there are some issues in regards to HTTPS. In regards to HTTPS issues, that's becoming more prominent as Chrome rolls out new versions of Chrome, and it'll basically start to flag users warnings if your site's not secure. So the first thing I want to sort of tick off is around the crawlability issues. So basically across their site, they scored a 76%, which is great. But there were a lot of non-indexable pages. These were due to duplicate content, non-canonicalized pages, but also a large number of pages were actually blocked from crawling. So I would actually advise the guys at Last Night of Freedom to actually look into that and see why there was a large number of pages which actually blocked from the crawler. Because obviously, if you've got a huge portion of your pages which you're are linking to within your site and you're in your sitemaps, but you don't want Google to crawl them, you're obviously wasting crawl bandwidth. So I would look into some of those things and identify why you're blocking them from being crawled. Is it a valid reason or is it a mistake? I guess looking across the competitors' landscape, Last Night of Freedom is actually doing pretty well. But they're not too far ahead of the competitors in terms of the batch of keywords which I analyzed. But I do see a lot of their competitors are fairly close, so it is possible with, I guess, a few stumbles, the competitors could actually pass you. So good so far, but I do think ideally you want to be further ahead of your competitors in regards to visibility within Google. One thing I did pick up, and now I'm using the Semrush audit tool, is you have a number of duplicate title tags. These are also duplicate pages. So you have a page for your stag night and for your hen night, which is basically the same product, the same price, same title. So I do think there's a number of tweaks which you could actually make to these products and titles to make them a bit more unique and target a different audience. So as I said, it's not as bad as a lot of e-commerce sites, but I do think you can make a number of small improvements to actually resolve this. I've also noticed it's actually possible to load a duplicate version of your website. You can load the WW and the non-WW version. The thing about that, if you look at the bottom version, the non-WW version, it's actually different fonts. So there's actually something which is fundamentally broken within your site, because when you're loading the different version, there's certain potentially CSS libraries that aren't loading correctly. So I would look into that and sort of see if you can resolve that, and ideally redirect the secondary version to the primary version of your website. Looking over the site statistics, I think there's a lot of area for improvement. Majority of your pages don't have any markup. Only 28% of pages have a schema tagging. Open Graph is a bit more complete across your site, but I think could actually be tweaked and improved. Everything's fine with the HTTPS status code. I would also look into the canonicalization, because I think how it's been set up may not be optimal and can be actually tweaked and improved. In regards to AMP, I would consider if you have any content on blog, if you have any blog content within the platform, you look at implementing AMP links to try and get people consuming that content, particular mobile devices. There was a bit of a gap in terms of the amount of pages found within the sitemap and the amount of pages found within the crawl that weren't in your sitemaps. There can be valid reasons. They may not be primary pages, but I would look at your sitemaps and determine, are you missing key parts of your site? Also, the amount of inbounding links. 22% of pages only have one inbound link. Sorry, incoming internal link. So I would look at your internal linking structure to see if you could actually improve that slightly. Across your platform, you're pretty good in regards to linking to non-HTTPS content, but there are some links on a number of pages to non-HTTPS versions of YouTube content, which I would advise to probably go through and fix up. Because again, when your site is running HTTPS, it's always advised not to link to HTTP content where possible, because you may flag errors within Chrome. One other interesting thing I actually picked up in terms of the content guidance within Semrush was basically you have this costumes and fancy dress. Oh, sorry, I'm seeing a couple of questions pop up. So you have this page about costumes and fancy dress showing up, but you can see the number of terms which are actually showing up for that particular page. I would look to try and see, could you actually split that page out to target different terms, and ideally the engagement will be better, and also you'll have more traffic from these particular terms more likely. So I would look across a couple of pages and see, could you actually split this into 2 or 3 separate pages, which means it wouldn't be trying to target as many terms. Another thing is to look across features.
David,
yes, sorry, mate. Yep.
Ask you a quick question. Someone's demanding an answer to, because it obviously impacts on what you've talked about. It's from Modular Clay Products Limited. Semrush Audit. Would you recommend using the sitemap or
sorry, could you repeat that again, Craig?
Stuff like that on Semrush tool. Recommend using the Semrush.
Okay, sorry, I'm checking the questions. So would you recommend using the sitemap XML default setting? I guess it depends if you actually have that set up, because not all websites actually have an XML sitemap. Ideally, it is best to try and link in as much data as possible, because if you have an XML sitemap, and that's what Google's trying to crawl and understand, it is best to link that in with Semrush, because the advantage is if you link in with your XML sitemap, it can marry the data together and do a comparison to see what the gap is. So yeah, I would suggest definitely using XML sitemap where possible. Cool. And I've got the group chat open now, so it's a bit easier. So yes. So back to the audits. I think we're on the last sort of section for these folks. So yeah, so one thing that can work pretty well is optimizing featured snippets. It's something that I guess they're not focused on at the moment, but within Semrush, it easily identified 26 opportunities where it believes that you have a chance, if you create the right content, of, I guess, snatching a featured snippet. So I think featured snippets are good from an organic traffic point of view, but they're also great for branding. and you look across a couple of your competitors, such as a Stag company, they've actually managed to snag a fair few of these. So yeah, if you do want to sort of, I guess, capture some of the traffic away from them, I would look into the Semrush feature snippet report, and yeah, and kind of look to see which content is suitable. Don't always copy everything, or don't put content for the sake of content. But yeah, go through and identify which of their content would be relevant to your audience, and consider creating a better version of what they're doing. Another thing, so it may not be a huge thing, but one thing I might look into is reviewing some of your current backlinks, because there are some strange backlinks which are pointing to you. They may have been something that someone else has built, or something you might have built in the past. But I would potentially look at doing a bit of an audit on your backlinks, and maybe getting some of those ones, such as that Russian domain, potentially getting those links removed. Some people might advise you put in a disavow file, but I would say potentially get the link taken down if possible. So yeah, the links aren't bad, but I would say to review some of them. So Craig, do we have any questions on the first audit from anyone in the audience? Nope, no questions yet. Okay, we'll proceed on to the next site that was submitted, Mail Basics. So this is a site that basically focuses on underwear and socks and those various types of products. So you have very good photography, really interesting site, lots of great products. Again, the audit score showed they actually performed reasonably well. But they do have some greater issues in regards to crawlability, and they have a lot more problems within their platform, such as broken links and redirects. So if you actually look into the site audit overview, you can actually see that the Semrush crawler actually struggled across the platform. And yeah, I've actually noticed that there was a huge number of non-indexable pages that picked up due to some strange redirect behavior, non-canonicalized pages, and a large number of pages are blocked from crawling. So I would actually advise the folks at Mail Basics to maybe do a test with a couple other crawlers and see, are they doing anything strange in terms of conditional redirects based on the IP address or based on the user agent. So yeah. So this is always the thing, you don't want to be too, I guess, complicated when it comes to dealing with crawlers and how you handle your redirects. But I do think they might be experiencing some problems due to this. I guess compared to the first site we audited, Mail Basics is, I guess, further behind the pack when it comes to the SEO landscape, which is also good because it means it's got a lot of opportunity to grow. But you can see there's a number of sites which are fairly far ahead with them. Obviously, Amazon leading the pack, but even things like AliExpress, a small, I guess, average position, but a larger number of keywords. So yes, I would definitely look to sort of see what some of your competitors are doing in regards to their maybe their tactics in regards to on-site content. But also internal linking, and I do think you need to explore the crawling issues. One of the strange things I noticed about Mail Basics was what I determined to be category pages were actually no indexed. So I wasn't sure whether this is done for a particular reason or is a bug, but it does seem strange to have core parts of your site actually no indexed. It might have been done for the purpose of reducing duplicate content, but yeah, as I said, when you have no index core parts of your site, it does seem very strange. One thing I actually noticed within the XML sitemaps from our basics is you've set all your priority scores at 1/2 or 5. So I would actually advise you to go in and review your different priority scores and try and adjust them. So if it's for core pages, such as your homepage, ideally should be close to 1, and then it should be scaling down as you move down. But yeah, it's a waste of time to categorize all your pages as priority 5. Also, most of your content probably doesn't change daily. So I would also look at your change frequency. So one thing I did actually notice within your platform when I did a crawl, I could actually access your Magento demo store. So I would actually advise you killing off that page within your platform and making sure that it's not actually linked to internally. As in, there's small types of things, but if it's something that Google discovers or users discover, I will answer some of the questions on they're popping up in the chat when I get to the end of this audit. One thing I'd also advise the folks to look for at Mail Basics is review if your title tags and H1 tags actually match. Because in the example I found, you talk about Mail Basics microfiber briefs, and your H1 is Mail Basics brief microfiber. So there might be some inconsistencies across your titles and H1s, so I would advise you to look at reviewing them. So before we jump on to the next slide, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question regards to where do I find the featured snippets in Semrush? So there's a few places you can actually find the snippets. I'll just load up the report. So if you've set up a project in Semrush, you'll actually find under your position tracking, and I can't actually do a screen share on this, but I'm sure the folks at Semrush will send an update after this. So when you set up a project and you go into position tracking, you'll see there's a tab for featured snippets, and that's where you can actually find them. They're also available within the main platform, but that's one place I advise people to look within your projects. So we'll step on to the next audit, which is Webipedia. So this site actually scored slightly lower in terms of the total score. They had a number of more issues in regards to their platform. They're also not running HTTPS and have no hreflang tags. So yeah, so I think the folks at Webipedia have a lot more technical issues, likely because it's an older platform that they need to look at resolving. So we look across the platform. They do also have a number of high number of non-indexable pages, and they do have a number of permanent redirects, which they need to look into resolving. So yeah, from a technical point of view, I think Webipedia has probably the most number of fixes to implement. They have some 500 errors, some 404 errors, they have some redirect chains and loops, and they've got some duplicate content. So I will advise the folks at Webipedia to probably dig into the Semrush audit and identify why these problems are happening, and probably some of the fairly easy fixes when it comes to fixing some of the internal links. When we look at the competitors' SEO landscape, we can see that Webipedia is fairly far behind, obviously Wikipedia, which is fairly dominant, but also behind LifeWire and TechTarget. So I would also look see the types of content that LifeWire and TechTarget are actually creating, and see if it's relevant. I know looking at some examples within the platform, such as your article on Google Glass, was a little bit out of date and didn't talk about the new Google Glass for Enterprise. So yeah, so I would advise if there's newsworthy content that's coming out, you actually go back and review some of that on-site content and see if you can get that updated. I would also advise the folks there to actually do a split of your XML sitemaps, because currently you have sitemap 1 and sitemap 2, but I would actually advise to break it out into more subsections within your platform, because I think that will do two things. That will allow you to actually understand how Google's crawling and indexing different parts within your site, but also help Google crawl and index the latest tech terms. So I would look at potentially breaking a site up into the blog, categories, reference, study guides, did you know, and even maybe sponsored content. So yeah, look at splitting up your sitemaps. Because you're a tech blog, I would actually advise you consider moving your site to HTTPS, because obviously within your platform you talk about a lot of security aspects and a lot of information about security within the web. As best practice, I would advise the folks to move to HTTPS. And this is the error which users are actually shown currently. Another probably quick, easy win is look at improving your internal links to existing content. So this article about millennial generation actually talks about a number of other generations, but there's no internal links to these articles. So I would advise there's probably a couple of quick, easy wins by looking how you're doing internal linking to other relevant content, which I think can be quite beneficial. And also helping users, because if I get to the end of this article and I can click through and read about Generation Z, that's great. Whereas now, I would actually have to either do a search for that or potentially highlight and do a search in Google and maybe visit a competitor's site. So I would look at reviewing your internal linking. So Craig, that's the end of I guess the first three. We've answered Christian's question on the featured snippets. Is there any other questions which have shown up on the list?
There has been people saying, you mentioned that split is usually, something that you would do. Is there any, if you've got a big e-commerce website, would you look to do that by, how far do you split your stuff up on a sitemap? Is what one of the guys is asked. Would it be category? Would it be down to product specific? What would you do?
I would definitely split it by category, because the advantage is I can see if there's problems. So if I'm a large e-commerce site and a lot of my affiliates and maybe even resellers take my products and copy my descriptions, images, everything like that, I can actually identify if there's indexation issues based on a category level, or maybe I've broken something. So yeah, I would look at doing
cool. There's also another one.
Yep.
People are asking, the impending change what you released, that the SSL certificate is going to be essential. You obviously touched on the SSL certificate earlier.
Yep.
SSL have an impact on rankings though, or is this just clearly something that's going to impact because people become the non-secure sign there? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it will have some impact on rankings. Probably the biggest one is the bounce rates when people go to your site, see it's not secure and leave. Google is going to get much more aggressive in showing warnings, and I think Firefox will also follow. So it's probably more likely to affect your on-site engagement. I don't see it directly affecting your SEO at this point, but yeah, more likely when people visit your site, they get a red flag, they'll leave. So from that perspective, I think it'll have a bigger impact.
A massive impact. And obviously, when you're doing site audits and whatnot on people's websites, do you feel that that's an area that's often ignored by many people? A lot of people lay emphasis on link building, content, and all of the other stuff that goes on social media and stuff like that. What do you overall personal thing from me? People often ignore the more technical side of SEO, whether it is or broken links and redirects, and as a personal feeling of everything else is pretty much worthless if you've not got a sound structure there. So the importance of a site audit to me massive, and I feel it's often ignored. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it also comes down to the resources. So there's probably two parts. The technical resource, like my blog fails AMP validation. My blog's not running HTTPS yet.
David.
Yeah, so it's kind of come down to resources and I guess the concern. If you're a simple site where you don't capture people's details or you don't sell products, or you don't have sort of any login content, I think not moving to HTTPS is not an urgent thing. But if you are, I guess, taking people's details, login, signups, selling items, being HTTPS, it's very important. I mean, there's still a lot of e-commerce sites out there that aren't HTTPS, and you're giving your credit card details. So yeah, so I think if you're a blog, it's nice to have, but it's not going to be the end of the world. If you're an e-commerce site, it's non-negotiable. I mean, I think it's something like a third of the UK retailers aren't on HTTPS. And also I think there's a big aspect of fear. So a lot of sites have actually, I guess, screwed up their HTTPS migration. There's a retailer in the UK, I think they lost about 40 or 50% of their traffic because they failed to do the HTTPS migration correctly. So I think there's still a bit of a fear around it. But it's pretty simple in terms of HTTPS migration. There's no sort of complex things behind it. You just follow a couple of processes, wait, and then go. So yeah, so I think if you're working with a decent technical SEO, moving to HTTPS is not a scary thing. But you also want to make sure you allow the time to get everything done right. So I know we've had projects in the past where they've given us a week. You know, I think when it comes to migration to HTTPS, you need to have the resource to make sure it's done right, but then also you need the time scale to make sure everything can fall into place, because you need to set up your SSL certificates, you need to move your images, your CSS, your JS to secure environments, you need to update analytics to be running on HTTPS. Yeah, so I think a lot of people ignore it because they think it's too hard, but I think if you're an e-commerce site, it's non-negotiable. You're taking people's credit card details through an unsecure environment. Yeah, that will only end in tears. It's just a matter of time. In terms of best certificate, I mean, I wouldn't go for a free certificate. I mean, particularly if you're taking people's credit card details.
So
yeah, so basically from Google's guidance around it, Google prefers apparently the SHA2 in terms of which ones you would set up. So I mean, maybe there's other ones which people would go with. But yeah, it also comes down to the budget and what's sort of available, because you can massively overcomplicate it. Yeah, and it's not a simple answer, because if you're a big company, I think you need to look at the high level certificates. So if you're eBay, you probably want to do an EV. But yeah, it's mostly a lot of people should be fine with a domain validated certificate. That should do most of the work they require. If you're a large organization, OV, organization validated, because the thing about with these types of SSL certificates, you require paperwork as well. So if you're a small business, you're not set up to provide all the information, documentation that would validate you to have an EV certificate. But if you're Facebook or eBay or any of these sites, you have everything set up in place. So yeah, I would say the DV should be fine for most people. And I think Craig's still having a little bit of problems. There was another question, a follow-up question around the feature snippets. So if you go into your Semrush domain analytics report, under organic research, you'll see positions, and then you can see the SERP features on the right-hand side. If you click into those, you can drill in to see what feature snippets are showing. And I believe also Semrush has a blog post on how to get featured for feature snippets, which they will share after the webinar. So make sure you follow them on Twitter if you're not already. So Craig, I'll click on with the top 10 item list. If there's no more questions. Cool. So basically all the sites which are featured in this top 10 list have basically submitted themselves for review. And yeah, I guess the first one is a London-based agency, We Are Fetch. They're a mobile-friendly agency, and yeah, so I thought I'd be interested to see how they're actually performed from a mobile perspective. So again, this is not a direct sort of swipe at any companies featured here. I've used sites which submitted themselves to highlight examples of things you need to look at. So it's an important thing when it comes to your obvious technical SEO, review your mobile load times, because you need to consider, particularly if you're a global brand, not all users might have the same level of internet connectivity. So we can see for We Are Fetched, it takes 11 seconds to load their site on a 3G mobile device. And the great thing is about some of these Think with Google tools, they also give you some data, so they can estimate based on the performance, you'll lose around 30% of your visitors. So the great thing about this thing is you've actually then got a bit of a business case. So you can go back to your business and say, well, you know, if we want an extra 30% more visitors, we can actually look at improving our load time. Again, sorry folks. But yeah, so I think a common thing is actually the incorrect or the partial implementation of open graph tags. So we can see here, if I was actually going to share their homepage on Facebook, it wouldn't bring in their logo, it wouldn't bring in the correct meta description or the title. So I think it's a common thing for a lot of platforms to not correctly implement open graph tags. And when you think about it, Facebook having, is it 2 billion users, 1.8 billion users, I forget the exact stats. You know, you got a huge audience out there. So you want to make sure when your users are sharing your content on social media, it's importing the correct images, description, and title that you want to define. So you definitely look at checking your open graph tags. Also, that will show up in your Semrush audit as an item to fix. One of the other sites, conservation.org, they have a number of additional redirect hops. So this is obviously also something that's very important when you migrate to HTTPS, because a lot of times you'll find you'll add redirect hops. So I used, this is a Chrome plugin from Iwanow, another great London agency, and they will flag when you are looking at a page that has a redirect behavior, and it'll capture it for you. So yeah, so definitely when you're doing these migrations, particularly with HTTPS or moving to a new domain, you want to make sure you actually check off your redirects and they're not doing anything strange. Another person that submitted their site to the audit, but we didn't have time to do everyone, was the Humane Society. So my advice to them would be to move your entire platform to HTTPS, because you do have a lot of parts of your site where you're asking for people's details, you're asking for donations. So yeah, so my advice to Humane Society would be to migrate your entire site to HTTPS, because part of your site already is. Another thing for Humane Society, and it's a common thing, is to actually remove tracking parameters. If you're running Google Analytics, you can use event tracking, you can use Google data, you can use data layers in Google Tag Manager to push this information across. So I would advise to actually look at removing these various tracking parameters from your URLs, because they don't appear to actually have any I guess, impact on what content is displayed on the website. They're just used for tracking purposes. But these types of things can be done within Google Analytics and various other platforms a lot smarter. So yeah, so I advise if you are using a lot of tracking parameters within your site, you consider removing them, because you'll have a much more of an SEO benefit than you'll actually get insights in regards to how people click about your website, because it's a very old technique to use tracking parameters to understand click path. One of the other platforms that also submitted themselves for review, which we didn't have time to have in enough detail, was Media Temple. So looking across the site, I mean, everything's reasonably good. I think they can also look at reviewing the open graph tags, but I think they can actually do a check across their content to ensure the page titles actually match the content. So when I click through to the compare plans page, the web title is actually web hosting and cloud services. So I think there's probably a bit of a mismatch in terms of what the content is on the page and what the title is. So I think if you're trying to capture the compare plans traffic, which I think is quite substantial, you might want to look at reviewing some of your page titles and to see do they actually match the on-site content, and also doing keyword research, because I do notice you do Media Temple does use a lot of proprietary terms. So yeah, so I would say look at your page titles and ensure they match your content, and also do a bit of a review around your keyword research of what you call those pages. Another site that submitted themselves, Cruise Line. They actually have some ratings within the platform, which is wonderful, really good stuff to see. But if I actually use the Google Schema Validator, I can see they're actually not using rating schema. So I do think that's a quick, easy win for them and several other sites. If you have the data, I would look at implementing more structured data, because it will actually show in Google search results. And yeah, it's definitely something you want to look at if you have the data available, implementing more structured data. This is a very minor one, but again, it's something that it happens when you move to HTTPS. So this is one of the appliance sites that Appliance House that submitted themselves. They actually have a number of the internal links on their old error page, which points to the HTTP version. So yes, I would advise when sites do a migration, run a site crawl, load into Semrush or any other crawler they use, and basically see if you can find if there's pages which are still linking to the HTTPS version. And I have seen issues in the past when you've done a migration that the old HTTPS page, old HTTP pages are still showing up because your site's still linking to them. So yeah, so always check when you move to HTTPS, you don't have any links pointing to the old HTTP version. Another site which submitted themselves was ArtNet. They're not actually using hreflang tags. They do have 3 different versions of their site. So I would advise them to consider looking into hreflang tags, because I think it will give them a much better result, particularly when it comes to multilingual visits, and make sure people from the right countries land on the right page. This is something that's common to a lot of sites. Also, if you do run a multilingual operation, to actually look at using xdefault for your primary site or your English or .com site. So yeah, so ensure if you do deal with multilingual content to use hreflang tags. So this is another site that submitted themselves, Vitality Medical. And I know they're done from the purposes of potentially people sort of growth hacking or trying to bring people back into the site. But the question is, do you need to show notifications to the visitors, in order to get them back to your site? So I think these types of pop-ups are very aggressive, and it's basically a question, if you're doing this within your site, do you need to do it on all pages, or is it something you can do some other way? Because if I'm a user, these types of things really upset me, and I often leave a site, and I'll always block it or close it. So yeah, so consider, do you actually need these types of notifications within your platform? Another one, conservation.org. They have this massive takeover. I would actually inquire whether they need to show that at all times, and also look at the timings on when it actually pops up, because you may find it also will show up to the Googlebot, which makes it hard for Google to crawl your site. So yeah, particularly with Google having a bit of focus on mobile usability, you also do want to do some testing on mobile devices and making sure people can actually click away and close these if they don't want to fill them out. So yeah, so it's an important thing for all sites. If you're doing these types of things, you know, do a bit of a review and see, do you actually need to show the pop-ups? And that's basically it. So we've got 10 minutes left at the end for questions. Craig's just had to reset, so Craig will be back in a moment. So we have a question in the chat about selling high quality fine art. So I'm trying to understand the question. So it's talking about the images. Okay, it's talking about optimizing image. So yeah, so it's very important when it comes to I guess performance these days to optimize your images. And there's a number of ways you can do that. You can also load images depending on the device size. So when they actually load the page, you don't want to load the full high resolution version. When they click on it, you want to potentially open up in a new window or a lightbox that shows a high resolution version. But yeah, definitely I wouldn't advise loading, you know, 2, 3, 4 meg images on the load. Oh, and I'm going to stop sharing. I'm back. So there's also tools like GTmetrix and Pingdom as well, which are great for when you're going through and running some image optimization. But yeah, I would advise to very carefully look at the size of the images you're trying to load, even look at lazy loading as well. So don't load all 1,000 images at once. Potentially load them progressively. And you can also do prefetch and pre-render, and yeah, you can do a lot of very smart things. So you're also, in regards to some of those, look at some of the your competitors which are in the space, which are doing similar things, and look at how they're dealing with it. Are they doing prefetch and pre-render? And yeah, so any other questions? So yeah, so after the, oh, there's another one. So site unrelated to our site. Yeah, I guess people sometimes do very strange things in regards to linking. It could be something's broken, their site could have been hacked. But as far as I remember, I'm not Google. As far as I recall, John and Gary said that Google's pretty good at ignoring these types of things. So yeah, so the question, sorry. So the question is basically, an unrelated site has 1,000 links pointing at you. What should you do? What should you do? Basically, the links seem to be hidden with CSS. So yeah, I would also potentially contact the site, as that they may have been hacked. Something strange might have broken. They might have even wanted to link to you for some reason. But yeah, in terms of, I would always contact a site and say, you know, hey, I've noticed this. Is this normal? Yeah, I wouldn't do anything sort of more than that. But yeah, just reach out to sites who know something strange. As for disavowing, I mean, some people disavow and it works. I've tried it on a couple of my affiliate sites that might have got hit with a couple of penguins in the past, but it's done nothing for me. But then again, I've never really been an advocate for disavow. I've always been an advocate for removing the links. So yeah, contact the website if you're unsure. I mean, most websites are pretty happy. They might have not noticed this at all. So yeah, unless it's something like a sketchy area, then they might be doing it intentionally. But yeah, I would assume it's an honest mistake and just contact them. So you also for Tim, I believe after the webinar, the Semrush team will share out one of the posts about optimizing for rich snippets. So yeah, stay tuned for that one. So yeah, so we've got about 5 more minutes. Craig's had to reset his computer. So I'm staring off into the ether, so please ask your questions. Because yeah, it's kind of weird. I guess I can just talk and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. So hopefully everyone's sort of happy with, I guess, the items covered through. As I said, if you're using tools like Semrush, you can go into these particular topics in a lot more detail and just dig about. A lot of the time, doing an audit without access to Google Analytics and Google Web Master tools, it makes it a bit harder. And yeah, look forward to seeing you on Twitter. Follow me. Feel free to ping me if you have any particular questions. And thanks a lot to the Semrush team for being awesome and supporting SEO. All right, ciao everyone. Bye.